Welcome to SEC Sports Roundtable. I'm your host, Shane Bailey, back after a unexpected Christmas break. Apparently, technology, I just don't know how to use it, apparently. But it's all back together, all good, and I've got with me tonight Blair, Smyly, from a new location. Blair, you are all packed and moved and settled in now, correct?
I'm in. I wouldn't say settled in. I'm 95% settled. It's the 5% that drives you crazy.
You don't have any boxes that aren't in your presence, at least. They're all there. They're just all, the stuff's all in boxes still.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It'll be that way. You know, I've been at my house 5 years and there's still stuff in boxes. And lacrosse sticks. That's an inside joke. But Burton also joining us. Britton, thanks for being with us.
Hey, happy to be here. No boxes in my house right now.
Well, good for you. I'm impressed. Yeah. Well, most of mine are in the attic out of the way and probably need to get disposed of, but, you know, I'm a pack rat of sorts and don't want to get rid of stuff. My wife's over here actually agreeing, so that's probably true. So, you know, it's time to talk basketball. You know, the guys were saying, what are we going to talk about tonight? And I was like, well, you know, football season's over. It's time to start talking basketball and how good Kentucky is. There's no need to look back at how poor the SEC did, even though they, you know, the SEC happened to send out a release, you know, talking about how great the bowl season was. You know, talking about how 7 wins ties a record that the SEC had already accomplished, and were the only conference to do that, had the second highest winning percentage in bowls this year, aside from I think the Pac-12 was what the release said. But, you know, in all seriousness, we will talk some basketball, only because there was a really good game last night. And football, realistically, is over for the SEC. But we will take a look back at some of the bowl games, definitely talk about the national championship Final Four, and just get your guys' opinion on what transpired, what happened. I know, Britton, one of the things you said was, you know, it's not all gloom and doom for the SEC. They're not down. You know, why don't you kick us off and talk a little bit about that, and I'll see what I think about that.
Okay. Well, you have to say off the top, obviously, from the top teams in the league, it was a disappointing performance. I mean, there's no way around that. I'm not disputing that. But I think for people to act like this is validation that the SEC has now been overrated for the past 8 years or whatever is just hilarious. I mean, I talked about it in the previews of one of the bowl previews. I don't put a ton of stock into bowl records anyway, and that I said that before this happened, despite the fact that the SEC every year has the best bowl record. I just don't put a whole lot of stock into it. There are so many factors that come into play. There's always the motivation factor. You know, one team typically has the edge there. There's coaches leaving. There's players who are suspended for academic reasons. There's a 4 to 6 week break from the last time you played where guys are not in their routine, out of town maybe for a short holiday break, not getting the normal workouts in, not watching the film. I mean, their bowl season is crazy. It's completely unpredictable for all of these reasons. It just happened that this year wasn't a great year for the SEC, even though they still went 7-5, and the bottom of the league kind of floated the rest of the top of the league, you know, towards a nice bowl record overall. I just think it's kind of hilarious that one bad showing by the top 4 or 5 teams in the league, all of a sudden everybody's like, see, the SEC was overrated for 8 years. That to me is hilarious. Now, if this becomes a trend and 3 years in a row you're seeing the top 4 or 5 teams not only lose but get waxed. I mean, let's be honest, both Mississippi schools and Alabama got pretty much dominated, Ole Miss being the worst of those. That was the worst bowl performance I may have ever seen. But until this becomes a trend like it has been for the Big Ten for 8 years, where they have gotten waxed in bowl games and have had losing records, to me it's just a quirky year. Some teams had some bad games, and it didn't work out that well. But talk to me next year when the SEC is right back where it always is, competing for a national championship with teams dominating the bowl games. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I would second that as well. I think what you also saw was how deep the SEC actually is, because teams that you would consider 6 through 12 went and dominated their bowl games. The SEC East, you got a Georgia team that takes care of a pretty good Louisville team and a defense that was ranked in the top 3 all year. You've got Florida taking care of a pretty bad Florida team taking care of a really, really good East Carolina team. So you've got I do think it's just an interesting thing. I do think when you take a look at it, I think Mississippi State's performance was a big disappointment, I think, for the league. I think Alabama's was a big disappointment. Auburn, it was kind of a flip-flop. I mean, they could have easily won it or lost it. I don't think you look at that game and go, boy, I tell you what, they went into overtime, and so if they would have won it, would the SEC just have been the worst team ever with 8 wins? I think Ole Miss, I think that was right to get out of hand, but I don't think anybody thought that it was going to be anything like it was, the complete domination. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I took away from it was the defenses in the West and how they got exposed in the bowl games. I didn't see that coming. I thought, I thought that they would have tough matches, and I could see where, Ohio State. I didn't see where a 21-6 ball game that Alabama's leading was going to end up into a loss. I didn't see that coming, and so I think for that's a disappointment. I do think that for the Big Ten, that was a big week, man, and it carried over into a new hire, a really great hire at Michigan. And so I think for Big Ten, they had a really good week. The SEC had a really bad week. But I don't think when we get into August that we're going to be. I want to hear what the conversation's like in August, because I can tell you right now, the SEC West will even be better next year than it is this past year, and it's going to be interesting. And with the East, teams like Tennessee with their showing, Florida, I mean, they're not going to be a 6-6 team forever, and so I think with those teams kind of coming back into the mix, I think we're just going to be as tough next year as it was. So it's quite interesting. But I think it was one of those things, Britton. Didn't you get the feeling that I think if I would have liked to seen if the Mississippi schools played the second day and the Alabama schools played the first day, because I think with the Mississippi schools dominating the spotlight for the month of October. I mean, really, for the first time ever, it was everybody kind of went along with that ride, and they kind of enjoyed it, but they all kind of thought, hey, this is these Mississippi schools, and I think it was an opportunity when they didn't show up. It was an easy thing to jump on, and you're talking about on New Year's Eve where those are the only games. I mean, especially Mississippi State's game at the very end. I mean, it was the only football game on. And so I think getting that spotlight kicked off, I think it was an easy joke to make and an easy thing to kind of take control on social media. And then when Auburn and Alabama lay the egg the next day, it just kind of trumpeted everything. So it was a rough week, man. It was a rough 48 hours. I ain't gonna lie to you.
Yeah, I think that's true. This huge bright spotlight of this New Year's 6, which really shined a spotlight on. I mean, let's face it, all 3 of the 4, I don't think Auburn threw up on themselves. I think that was a toss-up game, like you said, but Alabama and the Mississippi State schools just kind of crapped the bed, and you're right, it was the brightest of spotlights. They're the only games on at the time, and everybody's watching that, and it turns into a punchline. And to me, you were right. It was a bad week for the SEC West. It doesn't mean that the last 8 years are now invalid because there was a bad week. To me, that the in-season out-of-conference games are a lot more telling for which conference is sort of supreme to the others than the bowls, because of what I mentioned about all the crazy wild card factors that go into bowl games and bowl prep. But when you're in season, you're in your routine, everybody's still playing for the same prize. That to me is a lot more telling. I'm not saying that you just completely discount bowls, because that's not fair either, but I just think that in season is just a little bit more telling for who's who, what the pecking order is, and year after year the SEC comes away 10-5 or something in those sort of out of conference power games, and it wasn't a good week, but I just.
Well, the interesting thing, like, just take the Mississippi State game for instance. They had 605 offensive yards, 605, and lost by 15. So it just,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Dak Prescott had not thrown for 300 yards in his career, ever. And he threw for 435. So it was one of those things that it's just it was a weird deal, you know. I mean, they literally on defense against Ole Miss and Georgia Tech did what they didn't do for 11 straight games. And I think Mississippi State was one of those typical teams that really peaked about week 8. And then they were not as good as they were at the end of October. And there was something that kind of went amiss. But yeah, it's just part of it. And I think that was the thing that shocked me was Alabama's up 21-6. It wasn't the fact that they lost the ball game. It was the fact and the way that they lost the ball games that really kind of caught my surprise. I think that Ole Miss was going to have a hard time against TCU, especially with the ammunition that TCU was going to bring to the game. You know, I thought that they would have a hard time scoring on TCU. I didn't think TCU would put 40-plus points on Ole Miss's defense and just really make them look terrible. So that was the shocking thing. I think there's a lot of stuff to go along with that, and I think that's why you're seeing there's a lot of changes that happen. You know, I mean, Mississippi State lost their defensive coordinator in the middle of bowl practices. Those are things that you don't really know how that affects people. Here's a guy that's been there all year and probably makes all adjustments in a game, and now you've got a secondary coach doing it. So, they all dealt with those things, and so we'll see. I mean, but it was a rough 48 hours. I'm not gonna lie to you, man.
Go on,
it started off really, really well on New Year's Eve for me. I mean, you couldn't. Before 2 p.m., it was like fantastic.
Well, so that's actually a really good segue to the key takeaway that I took from this SEC performance in the bowls. People always say, like, make fun of people who root for the SEC, and outside of all, I will never root for Auburn or Tennessee. I just can't. But I do root for every other SEC team in these types of games, and people make fun of that. But you're seeing exactly why we do that now, because just 1 year of 4 bad performances by the top teams, and everyone is saying, see, the SEC's been overrated for 8 years. And if that were to happen 2 years in a row, you know what happens in the third year? The Alabama or the Auburn or whoever that team is that's maybe they have 1 loss and they're in that 4 or 5 spot for that college football playoff.
They're now TCU looking in.
Exactly. All of a sudden, they don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore. It's so important for SEC teams to win these bowl games and to win these out-of-conference games because it increases the perceived power of the conference. Even if it's perception only, that is so important in being the difference between maybe being in the 5 spot and the 4 spot. And so that's why I've always rooted for SEC teams, again, except for Auburn and Tennessee, because if that starts to slip, that's going to be a problem.
And now you bring up a point, and I have to agree with everything both of you said. But one thing, and unless I zoned out in the middle of it looking at something else, I don't think this was brought up. But the one thing, if you look at the bottom half, y'all did hit on the fact that they all performed well. They have more to fight for and play for and to prove in a bowl game, even if it's a meaningless bowl game. Look at Tennessee's performance against East Carolina just the other day. I'm sorry, Florida. Florida against East Carolina. And who did Tennessee play in Birmingham?
Iowa.
Tennessee they played Iowa, but see, I think you got a point there, but I think this is the whole thing. Do you think East Carolina goes into a game against Florida and doesn't have anything to play for?
No, I don't. I think they do.
And I think that's where, I would say that Tennessee was at least the 10th best team in the SEC. All right, and they're playing Iowa, which is probably about 5th or 6th in the Big Ten. And they really destroyed. I mean, the difference between a Tennessee a young Tennessee team and the Iowa from just a complete speed and everything else was just noticeable.
So you saw the depth of the SEC
Absolutely.
conference as a whole in that, but you also saw the fact that they didn't come in and lay down or look flat.
Right.
They came out with something to really prove and to build upon. And Ole Miss, Mississippi State, LSU to some degree, LSU has been notorious for playing somewhat flat in a mediocre bowl game, or even a game that's not the national championship when they come to bowl season. And so it does cast a bad shadow on the SEC as a whole and how it's perceived on the outside, when there's a lot of other factors that you all have mentioned as to why some of these losses occurred, why there's coordinators not there. There's a lot of fluctuation going on and uncertainty in staffs right there. You've got some coaches that are on board that won't even be able to coach. Look at Auburn with Muschamp. He came on board. He wasn't able to be on the field to coach during the game, but yet he's the D coordinator. You've got Mississippi State, who, shortly thereafter was able to name a defensive coordinator. So you have all these different things that come into play that affect a team. It also affects those kids mentally because they fought in the trenches with these coaches and they're no longer there. Somebody new's coming in trying to put their imprint, especially when you're talking about a senior class that doesn't care anymore. They're gone after this next game. It means nothing to them. So you have some of that, and I'm not saying that other conferences don't have to fight those things, but I think the SEC, because of the depth that all the way down, it just wasn't as important to some of those programs.
Yeah. I think the other thing, that I took away, and this is a little bit of a soapbox, so if I get off on a little bit of a tangent here, please endure it for a minute. But what I thought I loved was I felt like for New Year's Eve, I remember New Year's Eve, I met my in-laws, I've got my kids, I've got cousins, we got like 6 kids under the age of like 7. And at 8 o'clock, they want to do like a 5-minute New Year's Eve celebration so they can all go to bed. And I was literally like, you're messing up my 11 hours of football. Like I'm 8 hours into this, and now I've got to stop for 5 minutes. I felt, because it felt like for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, it's like it all set up perfect with the way they scheduled it. And I thought we took the New Year's Day, it was like I was 10 again. And things mattered. Those 2 days weren't just random games. They were real meaningful games. And then you look at the schedule next year, and guess what? The 2 semifinal games, they're not going to be on New Year's Day. They're going to be on New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve, yeah.
It's the stupidest thing ever.
Yeah,
and
it should all build up.
And I don't understand how the bowls get to dictate this. How does the Rose Bowl? I know they got a stupid parade, but come on. The Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl should be able to say, hey, guess what? You're part of the 6, and guess what? This year, you're going to get to host it on New Year's Day, and the other days, you can just forget it. Okay?
Yeah.
We're putting the other 2 games on. Why the heck does the Rose Bowl got to be played at 3 o'clock on New Year's Day? So next year, we're going to have all of this stuff, and so we're going to have an 8 o'clock game when everybody's wanting to go out and celebrate New Year's Eve, and you're going to have an 8 o'clock semifinal game? This is the dumb. I think they got it right the first year, and it took them 1 year to screw it all up. I just think it's the dumbest thing ever. I'm like, I don't understand how the bowls can get together and they could be the ones that dictate when this is actually being done. I'm like, this is not how this works. I'd like to go take all of the members of all the bowls and just punch them in the face. That's what I feel like doing, because they've just ruined next year for me. I mean, do you think? I mean, they might as well play it at noon and at 3 on New Year's Eve. I mean, because nobody. I mean, it's not going to be the same. They waited for New Year's Day and they got it right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, those 3 games that are now going to be on New Year's Day, like this year, it all built up to the 2 really important games. Next year, those 2 games are going to be over, and it's kind of going to be again where it's like, well, these games are meaningless. At least they're good teams, but I don't really care. It's supposed to be an appetizer.
For me, I was sitting there going, this is nice, man. I'm going to watch 3 games I'm going to watch 4 games leading up to the final 2. It was like this crescendo that happened.
It's too logical.
Tell me that I'm going to watch the Orange Bowl on freaking New Year's Eve with whoever it's going to be, Alabama and somebody, and then New Year's Day I get to watch some slappy Pac-12 and Big Ten opponents. I mean, I just think it's stupid. They can have the damn game on New Year's Eve and do the freaking parade on. I don't care. I think it's the dumbest thing ever. How does the Rose Bowl and all them get to dictate? Just throw them out of the top 6.
Dictates everything.
Anyway, so that's my bring up. I think it's
plenty of bowl games that would like to step up and take their place.
So my question is this. So you're going to have the Cotton Bowl. So I don't know who's next year. I think it's the Orange and the Fiesta, if I'm not mistaken. So you're going to tell me, so the year that they have the Cotton Bowl, they're going to play it at noon? So say that so if they're going to have the Cotton Bowl and then the Peach Bowl, so you're going to play one at 12 o'clock on New Year's Eve and one at 12 o'clock on, because they basically say these times are set.
Yeah, the times are set.
6 games are going to be set for the next 12 years. And it's just, you're just going to play the semifinal in that time slot of whatever that bowl is. So you're going to tell me in 2 years that if they have the Peach Bowl and the Cotton, or the 2 semifinal games, they're going to put the Cotton at 12 and the Peach at 12 on 2 separate days? I think somebody should just get kicked in the man junk on that stuff. That's the dumbest thing.
No, I totally agree. It doesn't make any sense to do it like that, but the Rose Bowl just dictates everything. And, think about, the New Year's Eve thing doesn't bother me as much now because I'm 30 and I have a child, and, I don't do as much on New Year's Eve. But think about, college kids or early 20s just out of college who girlfriends or wives, if you're already married, or just your buddies are like, we got to go out on New Year's Eve. You're not staying at home and watching football. And you're like, well, I really want to watch this game.
I thought that they had it set up perfectly. I thought that it crescendoed to those final 2 games, and I just assumed that that's how that they would restructure that every year. So those last 2 games were the big games, and that's not the way it's going to be next year. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So anyway, I was totally disappointed. I think it's a complete sham. I don't understand it. Frustrated.
Well, money talks, and all of a sudden they're going to realize that they're not going to get the same eyeballs, and you can see something get changed.
Well, it doesn't matter, because after next year, they could say it's a 12-year contract, man, but it's going to expand. I mean, it's just it may go the first 3 years, so that every bowl gets a set of semifinal games, and then 3 of them get a national championship game. But I don't know. I mean, it's just you're right. It is the money.
Did y'all see the viewership numbers?
Yeah.
Wasn't it both of them were high, or the highest rated cable programs ever, or something like that?
They were both. They were both more. They were more than. Both of the games were considerably more than the national championship. So yeah, so they dominated.
They were more than that Rose Bowl between USC and Texas, which had been the highest, and they were considerably higher, I think. So. Yeah, I mean, the money is there, it's so funny. Like, it took 100 years of college football to figure this out. Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if y'all saw I think it's interesting that they've already sped up the process where the families are going to get taken care of to go to the national championship game. So this whole autonomy thing is already in the works, and I think that's things you're going to see is, these families and siblings are going to get paid to go to every game. They're going to get stipend to go see their families play, and so I think that's a huge step. I think that's beneficial for what they're actually trying to do. But
I was amazed at how quickly that decision came out. Were y'all not? I mean, being used to how slowly the NCAA does everything, and this may not have even been an NCAA decision. I don't know, but it was so quick.
Well, the decision came months ago.
Yeah.
When all of a sudden the Power Five were granted more flexibility and leeway in the way they do these things. So it was easy for them to act. I mean, at that point, the NCAA was out of the decision making, if I'm not correct. I mean, it comes down to the fact that they were given some extra power and abilities to implement things, so they can just go out and say, okay, we want to do this. And all right, do you agree? Do you agree? All of a sudden, you got all 5 conferences saying, yeah, that makes sense. We got the money. Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I mean, that's the way I see how that was. And there again, that shows another step in this progression where the NCAA is losing ground. They're on a slippery slope when it comes to football, in my opinion. Back there, they're still okay, but when you look at and the way that this is all being handled, the NCAA is being tolerated by the Power 5. They're able to come along for the ride right now and ride some coattails, but they really don't have a lot of power and say in this whole thing at this point. The way I read all this, correct me if I'm wrong, Blair.
No, I think you're right. I think they want to still stay in the NCAA kind of shell. They just want to have their autonomy. They want to be able to say, hey, these are the things that we want to do because now we have the money to do it. I mean, you can see it now. I mean, guys, I don't know if y'all saw the other day. I mean, the average, first of all, I mean, how many times have you seen defensive coordinators? It's just weird, the SEC defensive coordinators flop into other teams within the conference. But, the shakeup that's actually happened, and I believe I think after Manny Diaz being hired at State and then the raise for Arkansas's defensive coordinator, that the average defensive coordinator is somewhere right around $900,000 average in the SEC. So the money is coming with all of these TVs and networks and stuff. So I think you're going to see going forward, those are the things that are going to happen. It's going to be the schools that can actually offer different insurance policies and medical insurances. They're going to be able to give the stipends. They're going to be able to give family those opportunities, be able to send kids home, do all those types of things that they're not able to do today. So I think it's beneficial. I think it's good. So we'll see how it works out.
And what you're going to have is you're going to have a player go play for that could be that could go to a MTSU, a Middle Tennessee State, or a Western Kentucky, or somebody in Conference USA, or the MAC or the WAC or any of these other non-power schools, and they could be heavily recruited, be a 3-star, but all of a sudden you could go play for the worst team in the Big Ten and get all these extra benefits, and that's where you're going to go.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that actually works out because I think playing is a big part of it. And so I'll be interested to see. I think it's an opportunity for those MTSUs and the Western Kentuckys and those that have the ability or the fundraising opportunities to be able to say they can join into those things. They're not eliminated from them, but they don't necessarily have to go through it. So the autonomy allows other schools, from what my understanding is, if an MTSU basically says, hey, I want to pay for kids to throw this, if I've got the money or the fundraisers to do it and the income to do it, I'll do it. And so I think there's an opportunity where you can create a Boise, and you can get some of those that can maybe take advantage where some of the other schools can't do that.
So are you going to get more of the UABs then? Were you going to get those that can't afford to get that?
Yeah, I don't think UAB could actually afford it. That was just more of a random.
That was Alabama just being bullied.
Yeah, that was more of a trustees issue than it was anything else. I mean, the numbers have come out on that, and it was a breaking even deal. So it wasn't anything that they were just losing.
It wasn't a $12 million deficit like it was reported.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting.
I noticed Britton didn't have anything to say about that.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about it, and I don't really care about UAB. So.
Well, it was your school that basically throttled them so much that they just folded.
Yeah, old Bear Bryant Jr.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I hear, but I don't really care. And most Alabamians don't either. So.
Fair enough. Well, that's a good point. So, anything else we need? I know that we mentioned a lot of coordinator changes. What about Auburn getting Muschamp? You think that's a good deal for them?
I think it's a huge deal.
So I'm really glad you brought that up, and I think that the Auburn getting Muschamp and Chavis flipping to Texas A&M.
That's huge.
Yeah, obviously two huge hires by those schools, and to me it's going to be absolutely fascinating because the theory for years and years has been, or I don't know about years and years, but the theory has been that these kind of up-tempo, no huddle, throw the ball all over the field, score quickly offenses cannot have, even maybe above average or maybe even average defenses. And we've seen the numbers on Texas A&M's defense certainly, and even Auburn's defense to a much lesser extent, not be good defenses. But now we're about to have a real case study with two of the best defensive coordinators there are in college football operating on, teams that are that style of offense. And I think the debate is going to be settled kind of once and for all with the next however long those guys are there, whether it's only 1 or 2 or 3 years. We're going to see, okay, can you field a competitive, high-level defense with this style of offense? And I don't think I know the answer. I know that Gary Danielson and some other people have said it doesn't really matter who you have at defensive coordinator. Like Ellis Johnson didn't just forget how to coach defense when he went to Auburn after having top 10, top 20 defenses at every other stop. But it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Well, I think the one thing that you'll have to see is I think the guys like Ellis Johnson weren't good at adjusting to the new age of football. And what I think you'll find, I think Muschamp is a bright enough guy and really, really good defensive coordinator that he's going to be able to figure out the nuances of what I'm going to have to do with guys staying on the field longer because my offense is running so quick. It's all of those types of things. I think John Chavis is a guy that he's proved it at 2 spots. And what everybody does is after a while, they all kind of they all kind of gripe a little bit about Chavis, and then when he leaves, they go, man, he was really good. And I think that's what LSU's going to find out is, damn, he was really, really good. I do think, I think they're really 2 good hires. I'm really interested to see how it does. It sucks because I'm in the SEC West, and everybody's just getting better. I will say, do not underestimate Mississippi State's hire Manny Diaz back to Mississippi State. I think I'm not a big proponent of rehiring somebody, but this is a scenario where if you look at Mississippi State this year and you take a look back, you go, man, they gave up 30 points or more in 5 games. Mississippi State ended up with the number 1 offense in the SEC. So just let that sink in. 513 yards by average a game. You know what their highest, the highest per game average that they had before this year was 434. They completely destroyed it. So, and they averaged 35 points a game. If you put 35 points up, you should be able to win the ball game. And I think that's what you're going to see with Auburn and Texas A&M, and even to those those Mississippi States that have such a prolific quarterback that can actually take them to another level, like they did this year, is that you don't necessarily need a team to hold anybody to 12 points. You just don't need to let people score 30.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're going to see with Auburn and Texas A&M is that you got to figure out a way to stay in that 22 to 23 points per game and not give up explosive plays and those types of things. But I think what you'll actually see, what it told me with Manny Diaz was, number one, that Dan Mullen and his relationship when he jumped after 1 year at Mississippi State to go to Texas for $900,000 a year and triple his salary was Mullen. There's a couple of things working there. Mullen knows he's going to have a good team next year, so he can bring back somebody that he knows what they are about. They've been in the program. It's not going to be a huge adjustment within all of the people there. But the one thing that Manny Diaz does, if you look at what Mississippi State did this year under Jeff Collins and what they did under Manny and what he's done in his career. He creates turnovers. La Tech had 46 turnovers this year, which was the most in the NCAA. He doesn't allow people to score points. And so when you look at all of those categories, that's what Mississippi State needs. In the year that he was there, I mean, in 2010, we had a pretty dominant defense. And, we had 9 guys that went to the NFL off that defense, and so a lot of people will tell you that they had good players. But I'm willing to bet that in 2015, Mississippi State has well more depth and recruited at such a higher level over the last 4 years that they got way better players than they did in 2010. So I think what it told me was Dan Mullen knows he's still got a good team. He's got Dak Prescott coming back, all the offense coming back, that if he can just get somebody in there that can actually tweak some things, and create more turnovers. That was the big disappointment for Mississippi State. They only had 23 turnovers on the year. They didn't turn the ball over, and with that offense, that's what they needed. So, but I think it's huge coordinator stuff. I think, what's the McElwain at Florida? I think he's hiring a really good staff.
Well, Georgia just hired Schottenheimer as their OC, which I was floored by that. I mean, it's becoming. I think I saw a tweet today. There's now 2 former head coaches and one or 2 former former NFL head coaches and former coordinators now in the SEC as coordinators. So it's it kind of goes back to the money discussion. The money that's flowing through college football now is kind of leveling the playing field with the NFL, and I think you're going to see more and more this jumping back and forth trend. And I mean, it's absolutely an arms race. It's the SEC West, especially, is just an arms race, and it's going to be nuts.
Well, just to go to this, guys. I mean, just take Mississippi State, which y'all would probably consider from a monetary standpoint slightly below Ole Miss. Ole Miss is always going to be just a little bit more. They're going to have a $5 million more budget than Mississippi State. It's just kind of the way it is. So Mississippi State's always going to be 13th or 14th in the SEC when it comes to I'm going to dole out and compete money-wise. They're fixing to pay Dan Mullen probably over $3.5 million whenever his new contract comes out. He might have taken a little bit of a dip after the Orange Bowl deal. But to give you an idea, Manny Diaz, we were just talking about, Manny Diaz made $130,000 at Middle Tennessee State in 2009. Came to Mississippi State, made $260,000 in 2010, and left because he was going to make $900,000 a year at Texas. Now, in his second year at Texas is when the whole thing blew up. He was basically the scapegoat. I think we all saw now that it wasn't necessarily all Manny Diaz's defensive issues. It was a pretty bad player issue. They just didn't have the players. But he goes to La Tech, so now things didn't really work out the way it was. He gets hired at Mississippi State for a 3-year, $1.8 million deal. So he's making $600,000. He's making more than double of what he was making 3 years ago at Mississippi State. So Mississippi State in 2010 was paying, really 2 years ago, were paying less than $300,000 for a coordinator. And now they would have paid $800,000 for Jeff Collins if Florida wasn't going to pay 1.2. So, I mean, that just tells you how much money's coming in, that Mississippi State's going to sit there and pay $700,000 for a freaking coordinator. That's a huge leap in like a 3-year period.
Yeah.
But look at salaries in general across all of football. They've made huge. I mean, it's not just Mississippi State. When you look at the Power 5, even outside the Power 5, you're getting, just huge advances in coordinators as well as head coaches' salaries. Look what Harbaugh just scored up in Michigan.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that it wasn't as much as they had reported for all that time, but still $5 million. Basically is what the San Francisco 49ers were paying him.
Yeah. So now you're getting NFL level pay. And that's going to happen more regularly.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, in 2 years, every school is going to be getting a $40 million check. In like 2 years. So, you're talking about 4 years ago, Mississippi State was barely breaking a $40 million budget.
And when you think about what's what's one of your major expenses? That was not rhetorical.
I work in information security. I don't know these kind of answers. Sorry.
Resources, people.
Yeah.
So you look at the coaching staff. What's a coaching staff and support there? 20 people, counting all the coordinators and paid assistants.
Alabama's paying $12 million for their coaching staff, something like that.
So even if you look at just the $40 million they're going to receive, that's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that compared to what a company has to pay in salaries in relation to what it produces, it's not even close. And that's you're just looking at one piece of the income stream for these. Yeah. That's not counting like the SEC, where they get the SEC check every June.
Well, you're talking about like at Alabama, Nick Saban gets hired, and you're pretty much broke in your excess funds. Like they don't have a plush fund at Alabama when Saban starts, and now they're at like $100 million just sitting there. Tennessee, that was the big thing, is that they were paying so many coaches and they were giving money to the university that Dave Hart basically says, look, for the next 5 years, we're not going to give the university $1 million out of the athletic fund. We're gonna keep that money because we literally have no money. We don't have any type of slush fund here.
Hence the reason why it was so important for Tennessee to win a bowl game.
Oh yeah, man, that was a really big deal for Tennessee.
But I mean, it's that type of stuff, and that's why you look at these other programs like your Florida, who's struggling, Arkansas, that's rebuilding. These teams needed to have this win for those reasons. They didn't have the Alabama slush fund. They had to dip into it over the last little bit because of all the turmoil and changes and problems that they've had at these schools. So money solves the problem, and you're right. With these checks that are coming in, they're just getting bigger. When they go to 6 or 8 teams for this championship, who knows? But let's talk just a couple minutes about that one game. I know we alluded to it, and I think which one of you two tweeted out talking about the defensive coordinator not getting a lot of? Was that you, Blair?
Yeah.
What was that tweet? I need to look that up.
Well, I think most all I heard from Alabama fans was basically that that Kiffin was, and rightfully so, Kiffin really had and especially in the second half, really didn't run the ball, and and I didn't have a lot of issues. I didn't have an issue with the 12-yard punt and the next play where they throw a pick instead of running the football. I thought it was actually a great play call. I think Blake Sims just had a terrible throw. If he rolls out,
or a horrible read of coverage.
Yeah. Well, no.
It was a great pass. It went right to him.
Well, if you saw the replay, the tight end was 8 yards in front of him. If he throws a rope like he's supposed to throw, a line drive, let's sling it here, he tried to finesse a pass like he was going to lob it over the top. That's not what you needed to do right there. He needed to turn around and throw it. And a lot of people say, hey, why do that when Derrick Henry's going 7 yards? And I understand all that, but I don't. What my whole thing that I couldn't get over was, and granted, we can all say this, that Alabama, this was not one of their best defensive performances, or it wasn't one of their biggest defensive teams all year, and you can actually say that the strides that Lane Kiffin took on the offensive side of the ball and Saban allowing him to open it up and the things that they were able to do with Blake Sims masked a lot of issues that they had on the defensive side of the football. But I just didn't understand how, with a 21-6 lead, how the defense just fell apart. And I thought that was getting overplayed because Lane Kiffin's a very easy target to make. And it's a rightful target. I think there's a lot of issues, but it was interesting. And Saban's post-game conference was really weird. It was I mean, I think he even said at one point that in the midway through the first quarter, he knew he was in trouble. I mean, it's like it was one of those things where I just couldn't. The two drives and the two touchdowns in the second quarter after you're up 21-6 to go into halftime, were just daggers, man. It created a ball game where I didn't think Alabama needed to do, and I just didn't think that they held up their end of the bargain. But that was kind of my gig on it.
Yeah, and we exchanged a little bit on Twitter about that, and I was even guilty of it. I instantly just totally blamed Kiffin, and as you said, he deserves some blame because if they run the ball a little more, some of those defensive breakdowns don't happen because they don't have 73 3-and-outs. But I think it's kind of a thing where Kirby Smart has some equity built up by having been there and having had some great defenses under him, and Kiffin, as you said, is an easier target because he's the new guy. And there were some very visible shortcomings on offense. But the fact of the matter is that this defense just wasn't that good, and they didn't improve over the course of the year, especially on the back end. The frequency of the deep ball being hit by opposing teams against this team is just staggering. I mean, the deep ball doesn't get completed that frequently, in warm-ups when there's no defense, when you're throwing against air, and it just seemed like every team could just chuck it deep and nobody could make a play. And so you saw that happen again with Ohio State, but on top of that, they were able to gash with the run, and that was shocking to me. A third-string quarterback, it was just a very disappointing performance. I think the thing with Kiffin, it's like the next day as I thought about it more and I kind of cooled down, it's hard to be totally angry at him because that's what he did all year from a game plan standpoint. It was throw, and then at the end when they're tired, then you lean on the run game a little bit. Derrick Henry kind of is the finisher. And so I don't know why I would have expected in this game that all of a sudden he's going to ground and pound, even though you're averaging 8 yards a carry. And as Blair said, his offensive sort of opened up some major covered up some major flaws on the Alabama defense this year. I just didn't expect a third-string quarterback to be able to take advantage of those flaws the way that a Braxton Miller or a J.T. Barrett would have done, and so it was just disappointing.
Yeah, I think the other thing that really was interesting was all year I felt like when I watched Alabama that they were always playing with Blake Sims. It was kind of like this fine line that you had to play with him. And it reaped its head like the Arkansas game and, the first half of the Auburn game. There were times during the year where he was off and he didn't, and it showed why he didn't win the starting position until, the last week of the deal. It's the reason why he was terrible last year as a spring. He had made all these leaps and bounds. And so it was always like Kiffin was always flirting with that line of, hey, I'm really putting too much on this guy. And he had that Alabama kind of swagger where he had enough mental makeup that when he made those mistakes, he could kind of gather himself. But in that big of a game, does he need to roll out in that scenario where you need 6 points, you need a touchdown to get back and one and gain control of that, and we got the ball at the 30?
Right.
Why don't we run the ball twice and see where we're at, and then let's put the ball in his hands? Probably is the smart move there, but I was just really shocked, especially the way the defense played there towards the end, where they were playing and got some stops when they needed to get some stops, and then I think the Ragland injury was huge.
Yeah, it was
for them, and then the Landon Collins, once he hit his shoulder the one time, and he gutted it out, but he leaves the play, and then of course he's the one guy that's not in there on that big run at the end that kind of sealed the fate. But it was just one of those things. They won with the offense for most of the year, and And what I took away from it, guys, is, man, college football, dude, if you don't speed it up, Alabama can't stop the speed up crap. If you aren't pushing tempo and really moving the football, you're missing the boat right now. And that's where it's at, man. It's all about number of plays. It's not allowing teams to substitute. Saban struggled with that, and he's still struggling with it, and I think all defenses are. And I think that's what we're going to find out with this Texas A&M and Auburn stuff. How are those defenses going to, how are they going to actually do with, the up-tempo that's going on?
Right, and what it comes down to with those is, they're going to score, but you just have to limit their scores. You have to get some stops every once in a while. So instead of trading touchdown for touchdown, you occasionally get that punt. That's what Florida State was not able to do against Oregon. That it was from the beginning, that game was over almost. It seemed like Oregon had tempo; they were able to do everything, and Florida State couldn't stop them. I was extremely happy to watch that game. As upset as I was at the Alabama performance, I was just as elated earlier in the day watching the Oregon performance against Florida State, because I'm sorry, I've said this on the podcast for the last 2 months, maybe 3 months. Florida State was a joke. They didn't deserve to be where they needed to be. And they just got dismantled. And you saw Jameis Winston fall apart, get flustered, make bad decision after bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. Wait, he had 5 turnovers. 5. Bad decision. I missed one more. There we go. It was
his running back helped him out a bunch too.
He did, but still, it was nice to see that, because everybody talks about how ready he is for the NFL, and as a person that lives in Nashville, and the Tennessee Titans are a team that I like to say I root for. It's hard to say that the last decade. Them sitting at the number 2 pick right now, that scares the what out of me. They're going to take this joker.
No, they're not. I can tell you right now, James Winston being in the draft is a very beneficial thing for the Titans. They need him in the draft. So that news today was huge, because I'm telling you, he's going number 1. You watch. It's too cheap for a quarterback. And when they get all the stuff down to it, I'm
happy for Tampa Bay to have him. Let him stay in the state of Florida.
He's going number 1.
Hey, Publix is in Tampa too, so we can go get all the crab legs he wants. Maybe he can just give him a prepaid. He needs to give him a prepaid Visa of about $10,000. So whenever the hell he wants to go in and get crab legs, they know it as a county. He can just walk out at that point.
Well, what I loved about the game was Jimbo Fisher. The fourth quarter of his last game, he basically took a stand and told him if he didn't calm down, he was going to the bench. I was like, that's really going to go. Like, he's really going to believe that.
After 28 games of this bullcrap, he finally takes a stand and draws a line in the sand on Jameis.
It's nice to know that Jimbo has a backbone.
I tell you what, guys, I was so impressed with Oregon. And Mariota, I'd really not paid attention to him, but the thing that got me was, he had a sense, to me, was, I think whenever he was better than any quarterback, where if he sensed those guys, like that one, like when they landed up on like the 1 yard line, and they literally got lined up and snapped the ball with like 9 seconds gone on the clock. And Florida State, it was a big play. They were 2 cornerbacks were fighting, because they were arguing with each other. And he snapped the ball, and like 8 of the defenders weren't even ready. And it's like he understood, like it was always, he kind of sensed when they were discombobulated, and when they were, he ramped it even more warp speed. It was really interesting, man. But golly, that is a tough offense, man.
I'm excited to watch. Well, I'm not excited to watch the silver and red. I've never been a fan of that. But
that quarterback, man, that dude's huge. He's bigger than Cam Newton.
Yeah, he's enormous.
And he reminded me the way Alabama couldn't stop him of Cam Newton, because Alabama couldn't stop Cam Newton, and nobody else in the SEC could either.
But, you know, Cam Newton, to me, Cam Newton had a little bit more wiggle than this guy. He seemed to be a little bit more finesse, and so when Cam's the big dude. I mean, he's 6'6" and 250 or whatever. Well, this kid's 6'5", 250. But he reminded me, he actually looked more like a Dak Prescott at 6'5" and 250. Like, he didn't really shy away from anything, and he just bowled you over.
Yeah, I mean, he's running over middle linebackers that are the same size and just plowing through them. He runs like a fullback. He's enormous. But, he doesn't have that wiggle. He's kind of straight ahead, and then he can throw it 90 yards. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy, man. You go watch a high school football game. I mean, 15 years ago, dude, my best friend was an offensive guard in my high school, and he was like 6'1" and maybe 255. And here's a guy that's 6'5" and 250, and he is playing quarterback and throwing deep balls better than I've ever seen. I mean, he threw in 2 games against Wisconsin and against Alabama. I mean, have you seen better deep balls thrown all year? I mean, that dude was unreal.
Yeah.
All I can say is there will be quarterback controversy at Ohio State next year.
Yeah. Well, now they're saying Braxton Miller may transfer to Oregon or one of those types of places.
LSU's in the mix.
Yeah.
You know,
he's first
Everett Golson, and then they're like saying that he's not going to leave. But I don't know if you want that turnover machine. I think that little guy in the SEC is going to get destroyed. But Braxton Miller, when they said LSU, I was like, good gosh, that's the only thing that LSU doesn't need is a good quarterback.
Right.
Because they haven't had one in decades.
I'm serious, man. I mean, Jamarcus Russell was, oh man, they were. I mean,
he milked that for at least an NFL payday. I wouldn't say.
Y'all tell me this: how does LSU, with Zach Mettenberger, who we can all pretty much say is a good quarterback?
Yeah, he was good.
Jeremy Hill could possibly be the Rookie of the Year if Odell Beckham isn't. Oh, yeah, right. How about Jarvis Landry? How the heck did they not do something with that team?
It's like where offense goes to die. I mean, they had 4 of the best offensive rookies in the NFL this year, and they were good offensively last year, but they still were, 8-4, maybe 9-4 at the end of the year. And that was
18-8.
Their best offense.
Yeah, they're 18-8 in the last 2 years. So
it's mind-boggling how a school that recruits the way LSU does, with the resources they have, with the talent they have in their backyard, how they are incapable, other than the 1 year of Mettenberger, because his first year he wasn't that great, incapable of fielding a quarterback who is capable of completing a forward pass.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so bad at quarterback. Like, I'm kind of not joking about completing a forward pass.
Now, did he get injured in the bowl game or the last game of the season?
No, he got injured I think the next to last game.
Next to the last. So I mean, that really affected them because they ended up losing that game, did they not? No. The quarterback came in and won it for them.
Yeah, he beat Arkansas.
That's right.
On like a last second throw. Then I think they won the bowl game.
But they lost their bowl game.
Did they lose the bowl game? I don't remember.
It's LSU.
Actually, I think they won their bowl game last year.
Did they? I'm gonna have to look that up now.
It was definitely the Capital One Bowl or something at noon on New Year's, but I don't remember if they won.
Yeah, they man, I tell you what, I just, and I mean, how good is, what's their big recruiter down there? Frank Wilson? Is that the guy's name?
Oh, that's right. They had Iowa. Oh, okay, so that explains it right there. They played Iowa in Seattle.
So they did well.
Yeah, but their top recruiter just landed that 5-star wide receiver. I mean, how good of a recruiter do you have to basically say, hey, dude, you want to come here and be another great wide receiver at LSU, but you might have to throw the ball to yourself. Why don't you just come on down? It's called a kid go to LSU and go, oh, these are great quarterback options. I'm going to go.
You make sure his on-site visits during a night game in Death Valley and show him what it's like there.
Isn't that supposedly part of the Chavis's motivation for leaving? Is that he was just tired of never having any offensive support?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he can go to
that.
A&M and have the same type of defense he does at LSU, but yet he's got an offense under Kevin Sumlin that can score them 37.
I'll tell you what.
So if he lets them score 28, they're still gonna win most of those games.
Texas A&M, and they've got some nice. He's got some nice front four guys to work with there too.
Well, and I know we're not getting into season previews for next year already, but with Chavis leaving, defense was the one thing that LSU was just awesome at. Next year, I wouldn't use the word hot seat for Les Miles yet, but next year is a big year for him. Like if they are 8-5 again and have no offensive production, then we're talking big-time hot seat the following year. This is a show-me year for LSU and for Les Miles.
And you're also talking about Quan Alexander, Mills kid that's the cornerback, all declared for the draft.
Daniel Hunter, I think, declared the defensive
so I mean, you're talking about another 3 or 4 guys off that defense that really ended up being the best defense statistically in the SEC. So I don't know. I mean, they got their act together about the 4th game and really started playing well, and then kind of faded off there for a little bit. But yeah, it's I tell you what, man. I mean, I think next year. I mean, if you just go down the line, I mean, you're going to Arkansas. Obviously, everybody saw that, but I think you're still limited. I mean, the Allen kid is not a difference maker at quarterback. He's not going to lose you the ball game, but he sure takes not going to win it for you. I think there's going to be
younger or older Allen.
Yeah,
either one.
But I think you got some limitations there, so I think you're still kind of fighting that. I think Texas A&M is still going to need another year. I think Allen's going to be good, but they got enough weapons that they're going to be better than they were this year. I think they're going to be a little bit more solidified. Auburn is probably going to be. You don't know about the quarterback. I mean, everybody's like, well, Jermaine Johnson, he's just going to be. He'll be better than Nick Marshall. Nick Marshall was pretty dang good for 2 years, man.
Yeah, Nick Marshall was.
So I think they're going to miss him in the nuances that he brought in that offense more than people.
They're not as they become more one-dimensional.
Yeah, they're not as diverse, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean Alabama. I mean you're going to have to replace quarterback, and that'll all work itself out. But I think you got a couple of freshmen that you can at least throw in there as well, if things don't work out with the Coker kid and whatever else comes around. But Dak, if Dak comes back at Mississippi State, I mean, they're going to have everybody back on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, losing Josh Robinson's when's the last time Mississippi State didn't have a good running back? I mean, they just throw. They got 4 other dudes there, so I don't have any issues from that standpoint. They could shore up defense. I think Ole Miss defensively is going to be really, really tough. But are they going to have a quarterback? I think quarterback and running back for them is their big questions. And so I think the SEC West could be, I think, just as good next year. It's going to be interesting, man. And Kentucky's going to be better.
I was going to say, and the East is going to be better.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's they're going to be a contender for the East next year. Florida's got to be improved. I don't see how they could be worse. Kentucky's going to be better.
I think South Carolina is not going to be bad.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be bad. I think they figured out a little bit on defense, and if those guys can play defense, Spurrier can get the offense going. Man, I mean, Georgia. I mean, for me, Hudson Mason, he didn't light anything up for me. I think he can be better at that position next year. And with Nick Chubb, I mean, that dude was a flipping animal.
Yeah.
He's like a greased pig, dude.
Yeah, you can't tackle him.
Nobody can get a hand on him. They just fall off of him. I don't understand it. He's got a massive helmet. Have y'all noticed that?
Yes, he does. He looks like a dark helmet from baseball.
Man. I don't understand it. It's like a bobblehead.
Maybe that's why people can't tackle him.
And his helmet sticks out out here. I'm like, how's that dude got such a bigger helmet than everybody else?
It's like that Don Beebe special concussion helmet from the 90s with the extra pad.
I don't know, man.
Well, even Vanderbilt, they're a big question mark, but they just hired a new OC from Wisconsin. So what are you going to get from that? I don't see how.
Well, I think the problem there. I heard him on the radio today. I really liked what he had to say. I think he's a pretty level-headed guy, but I think the big thing was there is that they had a defensive coordinator pretty much hired and the guy back out to stay where he was in the pros, and which forced Derek Mason to, basically come out that he's going to be his own defense coordinator and call plays. Now, I know defensive, I know from a defensive coordinator standpoint, it's not like you're calling plays, like you're in the game like some of the head coaches are that are calling their own plays on the offensive side of the ball.
Right.
But for me, you're putting a lot more on the plate of a guy that didn't need to have a lot more on his plate as a head coach.
That's very true.
Actually, so I heard a guy at work ask, was he going to be the defensive coordinator and hire a new head coach? And I was like, that's pretty funny, man.
That might be the most sound strategy.
I bet if you could get an honest answer from Mason, he might like that option better too.
I'm interested to see how that works out. That's going to be. I'm interested to see how he learned on the job.
Yes.
Yeah, we got 3 more weeks of recruiting to get all fired up about, so.
Well, I know something you're fired up about, Blair. And this is one time where in your household, I know your wife couldn't say anything, and that's when Kentucky won last night.
Yeah, we didn't even know about it till it was already over. So, yeah.
I know how much your wife dislikes my Kentucky.
You know what my answer to that is, Shane? Ole Miss never had a chance because they were playing in Rupp Arena. So I did have a Kentucky fan text me yesterday about 5 o'clock and say 22-point favorite against Ole Miss tonight. We start the domination of the SEC. And about 10 o'clock last night when I saw the score, I texted him back and said, 22 points, huh? He still hasn't texted me back.
And that Kentucky fan was not me. I will say that.
Yeah, it wasn't you. Yeah, so, I'm interested to see, I'm actually watching Mississippi State lose to Tennessee right now, but, I'm interested to see kind of how the SEC – I'm just not ready to watch basketball. I played basketball. I could care less about looking at it right now. So I'm still kind of in the football. Until football is completely gone, I'm probably not going to pick much up out of it. So Mississippi State's a freaking disaster. So being a Mississippi State fan, how about losing to how about this 3-game stretch? You lose to Arkansas State. John Brady, you remember him? Arkansas State, they're like 3-7, but they beat Mississippi State at home by like 12. The next game, they lose to South Carolina Upstate. Then they lose to McNeese State by 19 at home. And then guess what they do 3 days later? Beat Florida State at home. After Florida State just beat Florida like 2 days earlier. I don't know, man. It's a disaster. Well, I'm ready for baseball. Y'all ready for baseball?
I'm ready for the weather that comes with baseball. That's about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the girls in skirts that watch it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing Shane and I will be fired up about is I think our Cubbies are actually going to be pretty good this year.
Now, I am fired up about that. Did you see what the odds went down? I know this is not even close to SEC sports, but when they signed Lester, what the odds went down to for the World Series?
I did not.
It went down to like 12-1. It was ridiculous.
Well, did you see? You see where they may not actually have the bleachers ready for opening day.
I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, because it's been so cold there that their concrete that they had to pour. They don't know if it's going to have the setup time to get all the stuff done, so they're already preparing for grandstand seats and new locations to put people, for like the first month if it's not ready. Have you seen the renderings of the new development?
I've not.
Oh man, I'm going to enjoy taking my two boys there every summer. That's for dang sure. Yeah, it'd be nice.
It's fun even the way it is now with two boys.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
Well,
I still think they're a year or two away, but they're doing what they said they were going to do, which was we're going to suck for 3 years and build a farm system, and it's what they did. This is as good or even better than SEC sports. I don't care what anybody says.
Might have to disagree with you.
I don't know, man. You go with me and have an old style and sit in that ballpark and tell me anything's any better.
Now being there, yeah. I just don't know about talking about it.
Well, I know it's a long SEC basketball season, and I would love to say I could say Kentucky has the talent and depth to go undefeated, but that's just I see, and I have seen in years past that Calipari program, they can come out and just be so flat that any team can beat them on any given Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Saturday. And so I can't sit here today and say that the Kentucky Wildcats will go undefeated. Not to say they won't or can't. It's hard for me to, even as a fan, to sit here and buy into that hype right now.
Yeah, and see, I don't understand. I don't understand what the obsession is that everybody has with going undefeated. I mean, they're going to lose a game, I think. You know, I mean, number one, they have a really hard time getting up for a perceived non-big game like last night.
At home.
Yeah, but you've got to find somebody that can defend, because Kentucky's not terrific offensively, and because they're using so many players, it's very difficult for them to get in any type of rhythm. And so they're not going to drop 90 points on you. They're just not going to do that. But they're going to freaking suffocate the snot out of you on defense. And so you got to have somebody that can actually hit threes. And if they can stroke it from the outside or hit 50, take Louisville game for instance. That's the only college basketball game I watched. And if Louisville had somebody that could have hit a 12-foot jumper, I mean, all they had to do was hit 5 of them. They would have won the ball game.
Well, Ole Miss had one. I mean, they had 2 last night. Summer and what was the other cat's name? I can't remember.
The little point guard.
Yeah.
Edie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking before this. It was like the kid from South Carolina about 5 years ago.
Devin Downey?
Yes, that's Downey. I mean, every time you turn around, at least with Kentucky, that rim got 3 times bigger, and no matter where he was on the court, it was going down. If he didn't get cramped up and miss the last 60% of the second half in overtime, that could have been a completely different outcome.
Well, that's what I heard. Now,
yeah,
I saw last night on Twitter that supposedly where Andy Kennedy said where they had to substitute, which I'm assuming was this kid, when he was cramping, they had to substitute in
during a free throw
line.
Yeah.
And it said that he was not allowed back into the game. So if you substitute a kid out during a free throw deal, I didn't understand on Twitter if that was a rule of, hey, that was late in the game. But what my understanding was is that he cramped it wasn't near the end of the game.
Yeah, I've
never heard of a rule that kept them out of the game.
There's probably 7 or 8 minutes left when that happened.
Okay, interesting. I just was wondering if it didn't really give me any info if it was, hey, I had to wait a possession and then the game was over, or it was, hey, he was cramping so bad that he just couldn't get back in the game, but the way it came across was he wasn't allowed back in the game.
And so I don't know what the rule is. I don't know if there is a rule out there that says if you have to be substituted out for a free throw due to an injury, you can't come back in.
Well, we could talk about stupid rules in college basketball all day long. I mean,
but see, to me that rule doesn't make sense because
he's got to shoot a free throw, but I'm going to let the other coach pick the guy that gets to shoot the free throw. That's the dumbest rule ever. I mean, just because in an NCAA tournament they picked a guy that shot 90% from the free throw line, he made 2 of them in a crucial game. They had to go change the rule so that another coach could go pick out the 40% shooter. That's the dumbest thing ever. But anyway. I got issues with all kinds of crap with the college basketball.
Well, I'm happy that Kentucky were able to pull that out, but we still got a lot of basketball left to stay undefeated.
Yeah, well, I mean, corrupt arena, man. I mean, it pretty much the referees. I mean, those $500 handshakes when they roll in there, buddy. It's part of the deal, man.
Valentine wasn't there. He didn't do our game. I don't know what you're talking about.
Teddy, man. I will tell you that watching college basketball is very frustrating because the referees are awful. they're I don't know. The game's too fast. There's no consistency. You can pretty much beat the crap out of each other 30 feet from the goal, but you can't touch anybody in the paint. You can't charge anymore at all, and so it's just. Yeah, you can't charge pretty much at all. You can't really get physical under the basket, but you can literally grab a guy 30 feet from the basket. So it makes no sense. It's very difficult to watch.
So you could have played defense in today's basketball is what you're saying.
Absolutely, man. I could have forearmed Michael Jordan, forearmed y'all to death.
All right. Well, we have had a great time talking college football. We've talked some basketball. We have given some opinions, and we want to thank you all for listening in. We will be back again to rehash and review what's going on, I guess, we get a dead period next week, don't we, starting next week in college football for recruiting, I believe.
Is it?
First trip start this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's...
But I think the dead period's gone.
Dead period was over the bowl break, I think. It's a sprint to February whatever now.
All right, so it's going full speed.
Yeah.
But they also came out with baseball rankings too this past week there, Shaner. So you ought to check into that too.
Oh, we already talked about the Cubs. That's all we need to talk about for baseball.
We'll have a full 90-minute breakdown of the college baseball rankings on next week's podcast. Be sure and tune in.
We'll do that separately. We'll do two podcasts. You're a Rodney Dangerfield. No respect. No respect.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, thank you all for joining in. Now that I know how to use my texting capability on my phone, maybe we can get Britton back on a more regular basis. And thank you, Blair and Britton, for joining me. I will call this podcast done.